Okay, hopefully without missing a beat, I want to transition to the International SSA and Collaboration panel. Just to kind of give it a little overview, the utilization of space benefits people, industries, and governments around the globe. From the farmer who can plan his crop based on satellite drought predictions, to the daily use of broadband communications and satellite imagery for search and rescue operations, the utilization of space benefits all people, industries, and governments around the globe. And all nations have the right to use and explore space, but with this right also comes a great responsibility. Governments, commercial and civil industries must all work together to preserve the use of space for future generations. International SSA collaboration will mitigate the risks of operating and protecting the peaceful use of outer space. With that said, we have a fantastic panel coming up, led by Jana Robinson, who I had the pleasure of meeting last night and discussing. I'll give a quick overview of Jana's bio. She's currently the resident fellow at the European Space Policy Institute in Vienna, which is somewhat of a spin-off of the European Space Agency. Prior to that, she was the development director at the Prague Security Studies Institute. Jana has a tremendous background in international relations. She studied not only in Prague, in China, as well as in the US, most recently at the George Washington University International School, the Elliott School, and as well as the International Space University. And once you talk to Jana, as you'll see, she conducts this panel. Not only does she have a global vision on space policy, world space policy, but on all matters, as Travis and I were getting to know, on whether it ranged from China or Syria or Russia or South America. So she's just tremendously well-versed in all aspects of not just space policy, but global policy. So without further ado, Jana, can you please come up and introduce your panel?
Before we all settle down, I'd just like to clarify our institute, the European Space Policy Institute. Although it was co-founded by a Ministerial Council decision of the European Space Agency, we act as an independent platform, and oftentimes that give us space to also criticize what the different actors in Europe conduct. So we have, fortunately, the freedom to make research and recommendations that are relevant to Europe's decision making on space. And I also thank you, Eric, for a very generous introduction, which I certainly do not deserve, but I'll try to at least keep this panel going in the very international manner, and as he said, we have a very good list of speakers here. So I would like to open now the panel on international SSA and collaboration, and I'd also like to first thank the organizers for the wonderful opportunity to be here in this luxurious setting. As we heard from the speakers on the previous panel, the increasing number of spacefaring nations and space aspirants, as well as new and emerging space technologies, complicates space surveillance and makes comprehensive SSA a difficult undertaking. As mentioned, there have been a number of efforts made to advance space security through SSA, especially on the part of the US, which shares SSA-derived information with commercial operators and other governments. The exchange of SSA information between satellite owners and operators through the Commercial Space Data Association, as well as broader discussions on the need to create a more comprehensive SSA pictures, are reinforcing of these urgent priorities. After all, these discussions are aimed at improving the security of space assets for all responsible spacefaring nations. In Europe, well, I should probably clarify what I mean by Europe here. So when we talk about space in Europe, we usually have a number of stakeholders. These are the European Space Agency, the European, more recently also the European Union, and of course the most important are the individual member states. So, and we have representatives of a number of major nations that are relevant to SSA. So just to clarify that, and of course also industry. So again, when we talk about Europe, this is not one entity, but a number of stakeholders that have to coordinate and make decisions. So the European Space Agency and the European member states more generally remain largely dependent on the US Strategic Command concerning space object location, tracking, and other information. But there are efforts to change this. Europe already possesses some radar and optical capabilities for space surveillance operated by different states. Europe recognizes that SSA is essential for the protection of critical European space infrastructure, as well as for reliable and safe space-based operations and services. Accordingly, a robust SSA capability is viewed as an important element of Europe's extensive efforts to promote the peaceful use of outer space. The Ministerial Council of the European Space Agency authorized an optional SSA preparatory program in 2008 with 13 ESA member states currently participating. ESA's first generation system is now operational and is undergoing a service review at this time. The second generation should be deployed within the next 4 months if all goes to schedule. The approval of further enhancements of the SSA system is expected at the next ESA Ministerial Council in November of this year. The 7th ESA EU Joint Space Council acknowledged the need for an upgraded SSA capability at the Europe-wide level and designated the European Commission and the European Council to propose a governance scheme and data policy. Among the issues that are currently being addressed are clarification of the core functions of a European SSA system operation, addressing the dual nature use of the European SSA capability, taking account of the national security concerns of individual member states, the mode of data dissemination, i.e. centralized or distributed, the role of public versus private operators, the issue of charging for services, transition from the development phase to the operational phase, and the optimal configuration of the cooperation with the United States. For its part, Japan, I speak of Japan because we have a representative here, that's why I cover both parts of the globe, Europe as well as Japan. Japan has recently emerged from a long period where its space program was, by law, restricted in terms of ability to serve the country's security interests. Japan's passing of the new basic space law in 2008 and development of a national space plan in 2009 has created new opportunities for the involvement of Japan in international efforts to address the most pressing space-related challenges of the 21st century. A significant contribution of the basic space law was the establishment of the Strategic Headquarters for Space Policy, formerly chaired by the Prime Minister, that has served the purpose of evaluating how the basic space law and the basic space plan might best be shaped and managed. In late June of this year, the upper house of the Japanese Diet passed yet another historic piece of legislation that reforms the Japanese space bureaucracy still further. The newest legislation creates a space strategy office within the Prime Minister's Cabinet Office that centralizes control of the planning and budgeting of the country's space program. This new office is to bring top-down leadership to Japan's space endeavors, including ensuring that its space-based capabilities provide dual-use benefits for the security community. It should also foster new and creative ways of making national defense a priority consideration in the structure and investment decisions of the Japanese space community going forward. This law also involves other changes including removing the restriction of the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency's involvement in dual-use space projects, as well as space reporting procedures of the ministries involved in space. To some, a considerably more active dialogue among the US, Europe, Japan, and other allies on enhancing space security, including via SSA, is imperative. SSA represents an important and, frankly, less politically controversial venue to enhance safety, stability, and security in space. I look forward to this debate on how best to leverage these common goals and others that will emerge over time, as well as to overcome present and future obstacles. I would now like to introduce the distinguished panelists who will speak to this issue. Due to time limitations, I'll be merely highlighting their most recent associations, but I'm sure that you will have opportunity to speak with them individually after this panel is concluded. So I'd first like to introduce Mr. Susumu Yoshitomi, Executive Director of the Japan Space Forum, an entity which seeks to assess the development of Japan's aerospace industry through interaction with industry, government, and academia. Mr. Yoshitomi previously served in various capacities in the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, including as Director of Satellite Communications and Satellite Promotion Center and Director of Space Environment Utilization Center. He was in charge of the Quasi-Zenith Satellite project and the development of microgravity experiment facilities on board Kibo, the Japanese experimental module on ISS. He formerly served as Director of the Liaison Office in Paris of Japan's National Space Development Agency, JAXA's predecessor, from 1991 to 1994. While at NASDA, he was involved in a number of satellite projects. So, welcome on the panel. Our next speaker will be Lieutenant Colonel Lothar Pichler, who is currently with the German Space Situational Awareness Center. Previously, he worked as a space expert for NATO's think tank, the NATO Joint Air Power Competence Center, as well as for the intelligence subdivision of the NATO Allied Command Transformation in Norfolk, Virginia, from 2004 to 2008. While at JAPCC, Colonel Pichler was involved in the establishment of the NATO Space Project Team, individual space training at the NATO School in Oberammergau, individual space training at the NATO's Research and Technology Organization, and the Multinational Experiment Space Working Group. Colonel Pichler joined the German Air Force in 1987 and holds a Master of Science degree in Aeronautic and Space Technology from the Munich Military University, as well as an MA in National Security from the US Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. We're also delighted to have with us Colonel Frank Schottenloher, Chief of the Space Environment Mastery Office at the Joint Space Command in Paris. In this capacity, Colonel Schottenloher is responsible, and I apologize for massacring your name, is responsible for the space situational awareness-related activities, including collision avoidance and space debris mitigation. He also manages the portfolio relating to the expert of sensitive space material and image distribution. Previously, he served as Chief of the Space Surveillance Division at Situational Awareness Prediction Office at the headquarters of the Air Defense and Air Operation Command. He was involved in the development and deployment of GRAFS, the main French space surveillance system. He has also been engaged in introducing space-related issues into air operations and doctrines. Colonel Schottenloher holds a master's degree from the French Air Force Academy. And our final speaker will be Major Giovanni Falcucci, who served with the Space Office of the Italian Defense Ministry's General Staff 4 Department, which manages the ministry's space programs. He's currently involved in the EU's program entitled Support to Precursor SSA Services. He also served as the Italian Space Agency advisor concerning the European Space Agency SSA program and as a member of the European Defense Agency's SSA project team. Major Falcucci holds a master's degree in aeronautics engineering. So with this, I'd like to welcome all the panelists And I will give each of them a few minutes to provide some introductory remarks, which will provide opportunities to all of you in the audience to prepare any questions that you might have to the international panelists. And then we can jump into the Q&As after that. So I will give floor to Mr. Yoshitomi.
Okay, thank you very much, Yana. And aloha, everybody. I'm from, my name is Susumi Yoshitomi. I'm from Japan Space Forum. Our organization is a non-profit organization. Our organization main task is supporting activity for the JAXA, like public relations and ISS experiment and supporting. And also we are managing and operating the space development facility in Japan. So, and also the early this year, March, beginning of the March, we hold first SSA symposium in Tokyo. So at the time, we invite many of the distinguished guests from the United States, like Frank Rose and many of the U.S. Defense DOD, and also we invite Yana and any other European distinguished guests. So as Yana introduced you my career, I joined NASA, former JAXA, and in 1947, I was mainly involved with the satellite project, like first NASA satellite and the first Japanese geosynchronous satellite, something like that. And also I was living in Paris for a liaison director. And after the comeback to Japan in 1994, I was involved in the space station program. Especially I was a project manager of the space experiment on the space station. And my last career in JAXA was the initiation of a quasi-zenith satellite project. It's a cooperation with US GPS programs. And then I retired from JAXA 2007. I joined the Japan Space Forum. And my heavy duty in the Japan Space Forum is operating the space debris facility. They collaborate with JAXA. We are supporting space debris observation activity for JAXA. And today, I was invited from the this conference. When I look at this panelist, I'm not military. The rest of the three, they are from the military person. So this is the reality in Japan, because in Japan, the space activity is quite limited by the peaceful purposes. This peaceful purposes is like a meaning of the non-military, just non-military. This is the definition of peaceful purpose for the space activity in Japan. But Yana, I introduced you that we established a space basic law in 2008, and the government established a new space basic plan in 2009. Then the Ministry of Defense can initiate some space project, but at this moment they don't have any concrete the project. They are thinking about that. I heard from my colleague. So, and also any person from Ministry of Defense in Japan cannot participate in these opportunities. Then my colleague asked them to participate but they hesitate to come here today. So this is the reality in Japan. And also I will introduce you the mechanism of Japanese space policy management. And in 1968, Japanese government entered into the space activity. At that time, they established the Space Activity Commission. It belonged to the Science and Technology Agency, one of the ministry of the Japanese government. The chairman of Space Activity Commission was the minister of the Science and Technology Agency. But at the time, this SAC committee, Space Activity Committee Commission, managed all Japanese space activity plan and coordinate with any other ministries in Japan. But 2001, Japanese government reorganized dramatically. The Ministry of Education and Science and Technology agencies were merged in new ministries like Ministry Education, Culture, Sports, Science and Technology. We call the MEXT, M-E-X-T. We call the MEXT. And since then, the Science Activity Commission is a part of the consultative committee for reporting to the Ministry of Education, Ministry of MEXT. It's not all Japan function. And also this Space Activity Commission just watching the activity conducted by JAXA, only JAXA. They couldn't make any coordinate with other space activity conducted by any other ministry like Ministry of Trade and the Ministry of Telecommunication, something like that. They just watch the JAXA activities. Then 2008, the new government established the space law, basic space law, and 2009, and they established the basic space plan. Since then, the mechanism was changed. And also this year, as Ayana said, this July, the Office of the Cabinet established a new Office of Space Policy. Today, in Japan, on Wednesday, 8 or 7 hours later from now, they have a Space Policy Symposium in Tokyo. So unfortunately, I couldn't attend that symposium in Tokyo, so I was here, and they provide a new aspect for the Japanese space policies in Tokyo. So this is our situation. So and also we are planning to have a second SSA symposium in Tokyo next February 28th and March 1st. This is the second opportunity. So please, if you are interested in our activities, please join us in early next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now we'll turn to Lieutenant Colonel Pichler.
Good morning and aloha. I had to do that. I spent my honeymoon here on Maui a couple of years ago, and that wonderful greeting burned so into my brain. I never forget it. Aloha. I think we all agree in that room that our societies are more and more dependent on space and all the capability it holds for us. The same is true for the military. We nowadays just assume that we're always going to have worldwide satellite communication, that we always have precise navigation, and how can you run such a sophisticated system if you do not have the necessary SSA, SA in that case. For that reason, the German government decided to build a national SSA capability, and since that is a national concern and not a military concern, what we did was we stood up a German Space Situation Awareness Center by 2 ministries, actually. It's not only the Ministry of Defense, it is also the Ministry of Technology. So what we have currently is a staff of 15 personnel, 13 from the military and 2 scientists from the German Space Agency, the DLR. Some of you might know them. And we strive for a somewhat bigger staff, 50 roundabout, but the percentage between military and civilians will stay roughly 20% from the space agency. Our focus at the moment is basically to produce first actionable products. Actionable is one of those words I heard this morning in the first panel, and I think that's very, very important, that we have always a customer for what we are doing. So what we produce at the moment is collision avoidance. We provide analyzed space weather data and to the wider community in Germany, and we give guidance on re-entries, what's coming up and what the concern might be and the risk involved. To do those products, we rely at the moment as a backbone on the unclassified object catalog. But if you do, for example, collision avoidance, you know for yourself how difficult it is if you have to work with TLE. So we try to tap into other resources. Germany has only tracking and identification radar. It's called TIRA, which means we have to have such first guidance where to look for something, but then we can produce very accurate orbital data and identification of an object. You can't do that alone. You have to go international with that. And I mentioned already the space catalog. So our first way to look was to the west, to the United States, and build that cooperation with the Air Force. And I think we reached a very good point. We had before always between the Air Force's airman-to-airman talks, and now a regular aspect of that conferences is the space issue. So that's a very good involvement. Beyond that, we try to formalize our relationship with the United States, with JSPOC and that matter in cooperation and data sharing agreements which are written down. We are working on that right now to formalize that. The United States gives us conjunction summary messages for our 15 satellites we run nationally, and when we have a bigger staff, we want to extend the service to the civilian world too. Rapid Eye is one of those companies you are familiar with. Our European partner is France, with which we have excellent communication going. We have the benefit that France has a surveillance radar. Crafts was already mentioned, and I'm sure we're going to hear more about that. So, and our tracking radar, they mutually benefit each other. So what we did was a campaign in the past where we got the initial information about an object. We sent that information to our tracking radar, made the analysis, and sent it back to France. So it sounds easy, but if you have to do it between two nations, that data transfer is a very difficult thing to do. We talked about this morning about standards, though all those issues come along. Let me see what my notes are. With something I want to mention is, with both those two nations, we plan to have liaison personnel in our agencies, which means we're going to have, hopefully soon, an American officer sitting with us and a French officer sitting in our Space Awareness Center. The European, that good relation between France and Germany and that cooperation going on is the reason why we in Germany believe that this might be a very good core capability for Europe when it comes to SSA. And you mentioned already the European Space Agency. The European Space Agency has that preparatory program for SSA, and in that we are involved too. It has a broader focus. It had all three aspects to it, not only the debris issue, it has also space weather and near-Earth objects. When it comes to debris info and tracking, our center is involved that we do in the preparatory program, the data filtering. We talked already about the problems of sharing sensible, maybe classified information amongst nations. And in that case, the ESA, the European Space Agency, built a breadboard radar, a test bed, which is in Spain. And they're going to deliver the raw data to us, and we do a filtering to create a whitelist. And then NATO, the European Union can play with that whitelist. This is our involvement there. From all those three points I mentioned, near-Earth objects, space weather, and the collision avoidance problem, this takes most of our time. There is not a single day actually where one of those debris of Cosmos or the Fengyang satellite comes dangerously close to one of our military assets. And so that forum here is very, very important, and I hope the discussion will go on. There was something mentioned this morning I really appreciated. That was nations do not necessarily want to be only a consumer of those products, but they want to be a contributing partner. And I think this is how Germany sees its position at the moment. We might go the bilateral way, but this is only to build up a certain capability where we are able to bring something to the table to share in a wider context. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Colonel Schottler.
Good morning. On behalf of General Arnaud, Commander of the French Joint Space Command, I'm very pleased and honored to be here at this AMOS SSA Space Policy Forum. Thanks the organizer for the invitation, and thank you, Jenna, for your kind introduction. So I have only 5 minutes to highlight some points regarding SSA and cooperation. 5 minutes is quite a short time to deal with such a wide domain. So feel free during the breaks or lunch to come and see me. I'm here for you. So if you have any question, believe me, I'm not so much fluent in American, but I will do my best to understand your points or your question and answer frankly to your concern, and maybe give you the right point of contact within the French organization, which is quite sometimes very hard to understand. But for the minutes to come, I would give to you the French joint space position and the difficulties identified, and also the work that have been done on SSA domain. In June 2008, a French white paper on defense and national security highlighted space as unique, specific, and vital domain. Nobody thinks that we can manage crises such as natural disasters, humanitarian crises, without alerts and without the support of space and the services it provides worldwide. But maybe some of you are aware now that since May, we have a new government in France, while the other direction from the previous one. So they requested an update of the French white paper, and they expected a new release for December this year. Well, I have no crystal ball, but I guess that the space domain will not be so much affected by this update of the white paper. But my wish is that, and I hope, and the Joint Space Command is working hard for that, that it will be highlighted much more SSL problems and difficulties, so we have a much more policy and political approach to deal with SSL problems. But the previous white paper was very important because to enhance the benefits from space and in order to get better coordination between armed forces, the Joint Space Command was created in July 2010. I mean, brand new command. And the French Space Agency, NES, is double-headed both by Ministry of Research and by Ministry of Defense. So we have really good contact with them. That's maybe a good point for France. More specifically for SSA purposes, during the last 2 years, what have we done? First, we defined a capability roadmap. And of course, this roadmap includes cooperation. But also, we began military geostationary spectrographic observation. Some of you who are in the IDC community, we don't know if we are speaking about that, but maybe we can find something. On the legal framework, the French space law entered into force in December 2010. And now the French Space Agency is in charge of licensing operators. This law is very important because it gives us a legal framework and defined responsibilities. Moreover, now the French Space Agency is thinking about how can they licensing operators without having any space surveillance. You can say to an operator, you should do that, okay. The operator says, yes, I do, but you have to verify if the things are okay. At a European level, Europe embodies a peaceful and cooperative approach to space. For this reason, Europe promotes a code of conduct for space activities. This code, which is going further than space laws, aims at assuring sustainability of space activities. Of course, this deals with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in France. Okay, no, really. A conjunction of a series of factors has completely changed the issue of space application and space security. These are a rising interest in applications such as Earth observation satellite, a significant increase of space traffic, and an increasing number of space actors, government and private. So it is necessary to establish a space situation. Okay. Drastic increase in space debris raises up the risk of collision and makes the good knowledge of space environment essential. So you can think that the basic need is to recognize hazards to your own space-based system, but also threats to the security of foreign countries. But we don't forget that when a country or an operator faces a crisis, we are all concerned, not only the operator or not only the country. And with constraints on budgets, we heard about budgets this morning, and difficulties to estimate the real return on investment, cooperation seems the best, I would say the only way to achieve SSA. Well, we heard this morning about what is real SSA. 4 persons, 5 guys, 5 definitions, 6 studies. Let's say in France, 20 studies with a procurement agency, but that's another concern. SSA is often limited to space surveillance and tracking, SST, collision avoidance, atmospheric entry, space weather, and near-Earth objects. Okay. But in fact, for defense and security purposes, we also had to deal with characterization and identification and plenty of other things. That's why I say SSA is really a wide concern. So SSA data policy must take into account the dual nature of SSA, which include classified information and sensitive but unclassified information. Classified information is easy. Once you know the information is classified, it's easy to handle with that. You have rules. But sensitive but unclassified information, that's difficult to handle with that. About the dual nature of SSA, I prefer saying that the dual nature of SSA is much more between governmental and defense versus industry business, rather than military versus civilian. Too much often we oppose dual nature between military and civilian. I rather prefer that it's a problem of defense and industry. To summarize, I would say that I think that one of the problems regarding SSA and cooperation is the balance between sovereignty and cooperation. And the balance is very difficult to handle with. So cooperation is not easy in this case. What kind of exchange? With who can exchange? Because we must take into account that we are not on the same level of expertise. Yes, we know that the US have the lead on SSA, expertise, sensors, everything. But even in Europe, all the countries do not have the same level of expertise. So it's difficult to say we must have to balance of cooperation with countries which have not the same level and not the same responsibilities, because France is a spacefaring nation, so there are different responsibilities due to international treaties. So that's why we began to work with the US, mainly, and Germany for better mutual understanding of the space situation. With the US, we have a Space Cooperation Forum, which is there to the framework for our relationship, which has to deal with all the problems in space. But believe me, SSA is, let's say, the most important, we say the main topic in this forum. With our German colleagues, we promote an SSA core element for Europe with our assets and the TUA system, and the GSAC is fully involved in that process, even with between the CNES and the DLR, our two space agencies. And in the next few years, the Air Defense and Air Operation Command will build an SSA center in Lyon. Why Lyon? Because it is the future Air Defense and Air Operation Command main center. With all the necessary links, and I guess the classified links, with the GSAC, this is in progress, and with the GSPOC, I hope. But let's say to basic and really much more good news, there was another important point this year because we began for the first time exchanges of radar data, not results, but really radar data for an atmospheric reentry. And this exchange involves the US, Japan, Germany, and France. That's four nations. I will guess because I know that in Italy you have also radars able to do that. But we don't find a way to actually to do it, but this is in progress too. Re-entry of space objects is a major threat concerning people on Earth, so we need to assure a warning system for the population. Monitoring and forecasting re-entry zone and timing of hazardous space objects seem to be a good objective for a first step, let's say, data exchange for cooperation. So as conclusion, because time is short, our modern societies rely more and more on space for the security and for many applications with economic consequences. Cooperation of SSA, everybody is okay. This is obvious. But let's say that this approach of cooperation shouldn't be too much competitive, but much more innovative. Innovation not only with systems, sensor, or exchange network, but also in process and organization. And I think that organization mainly is the hard work to do to change our mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colonel Schoten. You already touched upon a very interesting topic, which I already see there are some questions like how to configure collaboration, and I think the speakers here will provide some interesting insight, given the fact that they only not have to configure relationship on a military side with the United States, which it might even in many aspects seems easier, but then the second layer on the European level, where on the EU level, there are now assets being configured, and with that is a need to protect them, and especially if they will also be used for the security needs, as is being discussed now. So and we have representatives of Germany and France who are those that own those assets. So to what extent these nations will be willing to share these assets for the benefit of the whole Europe, and under what conditions? So I think that these countries have to deal with these layers of issues. So we might hear more on that later. So with this, I'll give the floor to Major Falcucci and to introduce the Italian perspective on SSA.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Major Giovanni Falcucci, Italian Defense General Staff. I'm very pleased to be here, and I would like to thank all the conference organizers for this opportunity. This is the first time Italy takes part in this conference, so let me begin with just a few words to say why Italy can be regarded as a space nation. We launched our first satellite back in 1964 using an American rocket, the Scout. We built three modules for the International Space Station. We have astronauts that flew the Space Shuttle and Soyuz vehicles. And we had a key role in developing the last European launcher, which is Vega. And then, of course, we have our space assets. We have 2 military satellites in geo orbit for telecommunications. We provide also channels to NATO. And we have the Cosmos Comet constellation, which is a constellation made up of 4 synthetic aperture radar satellites with global coverage and submetric resolution. This is in co-ownership, Ministry of Defense and the Italian Space Agency, as we decided to go for the duality approach, being convinced that space program can be regarded as of common interest, both by military side and civilian side. Now, coming to space situational awareness, I'll try to address the issue at 3 different levels: national level, European level, and then a few words on the cooperation with the US. I would like to recall what was said by Lieutenant Colonel Pickler, as nowadays, today, Italy does not have an SSA operational capability. And that's a clear statement, and that's it. But we want to be a contributing country and not only consumer country. So we are trying at national level to build up an initial capability. During these days, a test is ongoing using an Air Force radar and another radar which is owned by our Astrophysics National Institute, which was used for deep space research. And results will be available by November, and we hope to have a quite good tracking capability. We are expecting good performance in terms of field of view and resolutions. Up to now, the SSA was not in the priority list of the Ministry of Defense, but something is changing, as we've had some collision warnings coming from JSPOC, US Stratcom, about our Cosmos Comet constellation satellites. And also we took part to the Shiver War Game 2012, which was really a great occasion. We had a lot of lessons learned, and from that, the priority to be accorded to SSA has increased a lot. So we are facing an economic crisis. We have budget cuts, but we are trying to manage and to build this initial SSA capability. At European level, we support, of course, the European Space Agency Space Situational Awareness Program, which is divided in 3 branches: the space surveillance and tracking, space weather, and near Earth objects. As a defense, we are more interested in the space surveillance and tracking branch, while our Italian Space Agency is more interested in space weather and near-Earth object studies. The contribution, national contribution, is up to Italian Space Agency, so Ministry of Defense provide advice, and we are trying to shifting the attention on the SST branch, but the decision is up to Italian Space Agency, and we have to wait the Ministerial Council of the European Space Agency in November to see what will be financed and to what extent. Finally, the cooperation with the US. As I told at the beginning, we do not have an operational capability, so we rely completely on US data. An agreement for sharing SSA data and services is with the US Stratcom is undergoing the staffing process at national level, and it's due to be signed, we hope, by the end of this year. According to this agreement, US Stratcom may provide SSA data and services, and as an exchange, Italy shall provide on-orbit info referred to its own assets. So coming to a conclusion, we are open to international cooperation, and we are trying to build up our own initial operational capability. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, so I'd like to thank all the speakers for giving some of the insights on the European and Japanese perspective. So I will now turn to the question, and the first question will be to Mr. Yoshitomi. And there is a question from the audience that how does the new Basic Space Law and Basic Space Plan change the way Japan can cooperate with the United States on SSA? Does it make it easier for the two countries to work together, or more difficult? And I would actually like to add one of my questions, like how does Japan feel about what was mentioned here on the European side, you know, the consumer versus the contributor, whether you're like, is there a big debate on that as well?
Okay. Last May this year, our Prime Minister Noda met President Obama. They discussed about some space security, especially the space station awareness. So our Prime Minister said SSA cooperation is very important between the US and Japan. But unfortunately, our government, they don't have any concrete project or some concept for the SSA. So just, it is very important, just saying like that. So we are proposing some SSA concept, and also we propose to establish a new scheme for the conducting the space station awareness activity in Japan. So the reason why we hold the SSA symposium in Tokyo last March this year. So nowadays our government thinking to request a new budget proposal to the next fiscal year. As you know, our fiscal year starts from the April. So they are requesting some SSA activity research budget to the next fiscal year. Then, so we can initiate such kind of activity in Japan. I hope. It's okay.
Thank you very much. I'll combine two questions into one. There was one question to Lieutenant Colonel Pichler on how does the military SSA cooperates with the DLR, and then how French Air Force cooperates with CNES. So maybe you can give some insights in terms of SSA.
From the German side, the DLR and the armed forces in respect to SSA are working hand in hand together. As I mentioned, we have staff sitting with us. The head of the German Space Situation Awareness Center is an Air Force colonel. His deputy right away is already a PhD from the DLR, and that goes through the whole system. The head of analysis, for example, is another PhD from the DLR. So you see that it is really integrated completely. If that's a question only related to the SSA aspects.
Okay, concerning France, in fact, in France, the Air Defense and Operation Command is in charge of space surveillance. So basically, I won't enter into responsibilities, but the Air Force owns the sensors, and the French Space Agency has the algorithm and developed the algorithm for collision avoidance, atmospheric planetary, and so on. So we develop a very short link between the Air Defense and the French Space Agency with a confidential link in order to assure a better network between the two entities, because of course one is operating in Paris and the other is in Toulouse. So, but nowadays no network is easy to deal with. So the French Space Agency has to deal with the problem of classified information within the Orbit Computation Center, but that wasn't a problem. So now it's easier for us, and we expect to have a better network when there will be in Lyon, because it will be easier to join the GSAC, because it will be easier to get a close link and a confidential link between Lyon, Calcar?
Yes.
Calcar and Toulouse.
Thank you very much. Now there's a question for, I guess, all the panelists. What is your reaction to the comments made by Tiffany on the quality of the US DoD SSA products as they forge ahead with data sharing agreements with the DoD? Well, I guess maybe that's difficult to go into like the agreements detail, but maybe like what is, you know, like maybe how do you see the challenges of the data sharing with the US and going forward?
If I take a first thing. First of all, we are very thankful for the data sharing. That's for sure. That's not the question. And the cooperation is sometimes only seriously between two persons. So that might vary too from case to case. For example, with Phobos Grant, the re-entry, we had excellent cooperation. And that was because people were picking up the telephone. So that was excellent. The data sharing we have at the moment is basically the unclassified catalog. I'm not quite sure if that's the question goes in that direction. And the unclassified catalog is TLE data. So everybody here in that room knows what are the limitations on that. If you do not know the built-in errors, you are reluctant to use it as the only source for collision avoidance. I mean, every maneuver is obviously cutting your lifetime of your satellite. I'm not sure if that goes in that question.
I will try to add something if I understand well the question. Nowadays, data sharing is based on something for operators. And the difficulties we found in the Space Cooperation Forum with the United States was maybe we should think about different entities. I mean, the first time we saw the data sharing agreement between operators and the GSPOC, or something like the US, we rapidly saw that it wasn't of concern for governmental entities in France. So we had another discussion and then another return. That's what I think. I said previously that maybe the real change will be innovation between our organization and new thinking about organization and who is in charge of, who is responsible of, mainly that, what exchange to do with. Once you have the responsibilities, then you know to share with somebody or another organization, but this is much more accurate.
So, as I said before, the Japan Space Forum has space debris observation facility like radar and S-band radar and 1 meter diameter optical telescope. Using those facility on the occasion of the Phobos Grant early this year, we provide the observation data to the JSPOC through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So the JAXA couldn't provide the data. So our organization is operating those facilities. So the Ministry of Foreign Affairs asked us to provide the observation data. So we did that. And also at the last SSA symposium in March this year, as I said before, the representative of DoD, they suggest us to join the data sharing, formally. So this is important for us to joining the SSA activity, global SSA activities. So, but unfortunately, our government doesn't decide yet to joining such kind of activity. So this is the Japanese situation for the space situational awareness field. Thank you.
No. Okay. There is a NATO-related question, so I don't know whether panelists want to address. If you can give us some insights on the multinational collaboration, SSA opportunities through NATO, or issues that might benefit US data sharing relations. I don't know if any of the panelists want to address that one.
Could you rephrase the question?
Well, what is, like, any kind of insights of how NATO deals with multinational collaboration of SSA, or what is the debate, I guess I would say, at this stage on that issue?
I was involved in a couple of projects with NATO and space. SSA is not seriously a main topic. The topic for NATO and space is more the operational aspects of it. I'm not saying that SSA is not an operational aspect, please don't take me wrong. When it comes to sharing, what NATO, for example, tries to do is, first of all, in the NATO command structure, to get positions which are dedicated to space. And beyond that, they would like to, I do not speak on NATO's behalf. So the ideas are going towards maybe having a kind of office where national representatives are sitting and are able to be a kind of liaison between the national assets and data and the NATO as an alliance, as a community. So if you have a standing agency, or if you have ad hoc with a command on operation ongoing cell, where you have national expertise, where you have national liaison, you would automatically share the data, like they do in the intelligence world too, where they have the intelligence fusion center, where national representatives are sitting, having the hotline home to reach back to information.
The main problem of NATO is, what does really NATO want? I mean, when I was in the travel exercise, and I saw that plenty of countries lack of expertise in space. Regarding SSA, does really NATO need an SSA expertise or not? I mean, as I said previously, all the countries in Europe has different level of expertise in SSA. So I think that NATO needs let's say, a space picture provided by the members of NATO, yes, but do they have to deal with the expertise of SSA? Do they really want to make collision avoidance process or threats or re-entry? It's not the concern of NATO. So we have to think about the space policy of SSA within NATO in order to assure a real concern of what they need, rather than say that they need to have an SSA, which would be another SSA agency within NATO and growing in organization, but not interesting. So.
Okay, well, there's one more general questions, and I'll try to go into some more in-depth questions there. What is the panelist's opinion on establishing or augmenting, I guess there is no agency now, an independent multinational organization for the management and dissemination of comprehensive multi-source SSA data? I think that's quite a big debate also on a European level. Do we have a new entity that's going to manage SSA for Europe-wide purposes? If panelists have the opinion, and even more international, global agency for SSA sharing, international SSA sharing.
Just another question with that, who is paying? Who is paying for? You see, in Europe, we are trying to build a core element with SSA between France and Germany, and even between France and Germany, you have GLR, CNES, Joint Space Command, GSAC, the future Air Force and Air Defense Command. That's really 5 organizations for only 2 countries. I guess maybe it's a good idea to have an international space traffic policies or space traffic police to handle with the problem of space traffic management. Yeah, why not? Who will pay for that?
Anybody wants to ask? Yeah.
My personal perspective is that maybe from a practical point of view is better to start with bilateral cooperations and then build mutual trust, and then maybe can enlarge this area.
Thank you. Well, now we can look both from the perspective of Japan and European countries. As nations develop their own capabilities for contribution to global SSA, how will sources of data be procured, for example, through national research and development programs, or through commercial contracts with operators or other commercial entities? So perhaps, maybe in Japan, how is this, as the nation develops SSA capabilities, how will sources of data be procured? Through national R&D programs or through commercial contracts with operators or other commercial entities? Well, if there's, yeah, we can start with the Europeans.
I'll try to answer this funny question. As I said previously, for me, the dual nature of SSA is much more between defense and industry and business. What we observe today is mainly for LEO population, government and defense are involved, mainly because we found there the Earth observation satellite. And for the geostationary orbit, we observe the SDA, that's right, SDA initiative, which mainly relies on business purposes. From my point, this is an idea, a personal idea, but I think that the problem is, nowadays for SSA problems is mainly focused on LEO because there are plenty of objects there, and there are plenty of problems, and of course there are plenty of governmental interest in there. But in geostationary orbit, you have mainly much more the business industry. So maybe the answer is it's between the two, because I think that we will find in a few years much more governmental investment for the LEO population and much more business for geostationary orbit, because there are business there and there is money here, and so there are great interest in that. I think it's...
Yeah, anybody else? Okay. There's a question for Lieutenant Pichler, is what type of approach has the Space Situational Awareness Center leveraged? Did they leverage existing technology to start initial capabilities, or do you rely on developing new capabilities?
No, we based our SSA capability on existing technology. With the European breadboard radar, which is built by one of the European companies, obviously we're going to step forward. It's a phased array radar. But otherwise we relied on off-the-shelf technology and technology which was already there.
And for Colonel Shorten-Loher, how will U.S. approach to modernizing SSA capabilities influence French Joint Space Operations approach? How will U.S. approach to modernizing SSA capabilities influence, or if and how, will it influence French Joint Space Operation approach? I.e., how much, I guess, the U.S. policy and other consideration actually influence the way the French deal with their space capabilities and operations?
I won't say there is no influence, but during the writing the roadmap capability, we identified much more the levels that we want to assure as key sovereignty for a nation. So I wouldn't say that there is influence and no influence. We identify cooperation as obvious for us with our US allies, but this has no influence on the level of capabilities we identified. Our main purpose today is to keep our core elements for LEO, and then made observation for geostationary before going to MEO, mainly for Galileo purposes. But as I said, we also began our spectrography geostationary observation because as defense and military purposes, we not have needs for SST, but also for identification and characterization, not only the threats for collision avoidance or re-entry, but also the threats on our own assets in orbit.
Then there's a question for Mr. Yoshitomi. What is the current status of Japan's MOD SSA efforts? Well, maybe the question is just like how is SSA going to be managed in Japan, perhaps? By whom?
I don't know. Our MOD is conducting. They are very much interested in the SSA activity, but I don't know the exact the concept of the SSA in MOD. But we are now studying the new capability for observing the space debris. At this moment, our facility can observe only 1 meter diameter at the range of the 600 kilometers. It's good enough. It's not good enough to observe the space debris. So we are studying the improved our facility to something like that. At a minimum, 30 centimeters at 1,000 kilometers. So it depends on the budget. So, but we propose to our government to study the detailed study for the next fiscal year, starting from the April next year. So we are proposing something like that, and we should improve our capability to observe the space debris. And not only the space radar and optical telescope. So we are thinking the radar should be S-band phase array, and also the so we improve the optical telescope be 2 meter diameters class telescope. So this kind of the study is now ongoing, mainly managed by the Japan Space Forum.
Thank you. There's also a related questions. Are the European countries collaborating with other Asian or Southeast Asian countries in SSA?
Other agencies in the world. Concerning France, the French Space Agency has contact with other agencies, of course, but SSA again is a wide domain. So if you enter into SSA, all the cooperation or all the exchanges that the CNES could have with JAXA, for example. So yes, of course, the space agencies are in contact. All among between them, as the CNES has contact with NASA and so other agencies.
We do not have any cooperation which goes so far as we have with the United States or France. But as an example, just recently we sent 2 of our guys to Japan to open the talk, to see, for example, what the sensors are and what they can achieve, for example, with fairly small optical instruments. So the dialogue is there, but not even close to the cooperation we have at the moment with other countries.
Okay, and there is also a personnel-related questions, I think, for all of the countries. When you are going to grow your SSA capabilities, are there shortages in your domestic technical and academic experts? What is being done to address any shortfalls?
Question. In Japan, there are such kind of the activity conducted by only JAXA. So, but unfortunately, the scientists and specialists are very limited, and so we propose to our government to integrate new scheme to conduct SSA activity, including the educate new engineers and scientists to analyze the space debris data and something like that. So it's in Japan, then only the JAXA conducting such kind of activity, but Ministry of Transport and Ministry Ministry of the Cabinet Secretariat. They are operating the intelligence satellite, but except the JAXA, those organizations are not conducting any space debris analyzing activity in those entities. So that's why I proposed to our government to integrate all the capability to one new center of the space activity in Japan.
For Germany, I don't see any problems when it comes to the scientific resource or the technology. And here I would like to mention our University Braunschweig. You're going to have a speaker from us tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. They are doing, for example, a modeling where you do not longer track an object, but you model the object way smaller than centimeters, talking about a couple of millimeters. The companies like Astrium, which is based in Germany and in France, they have top-of-the-notch technology. So that's all not the problem. The problem is probably the political will and the financial resources which are dedicated to SSA. However, we see a lot of progress. So the government is well aware of the situation, how important SSA is, and we see a lot of movement in the right direction.
For us, the biggest concern is we lack sensors. So we could maybe train some technical or people, but our concern is not on the knowledge, but on the lack of sensors. So.
So just add something. I think this is mainly the A of SSA, say awareness. Training and educating is sometimes very difficult. We don't have this kind of problem within the space agency because there are all specialists of space. But within the defense and the military purposes, of course, it's kind of difficult. And how to make awareness somebody who would have deal with space. So, in fact, in France, we divided in two parts. First is the training of people. And for example, we have within the Space Cooperation Forum in the United States, we thank you to share your ability of space weather training in Nebraska. But in the second point also, we are trying to deal with the problem of software. How can an NCO can use software and make a real awareness of the situation to the commander, even when the commander is not aware about space. So training has two parts. I always say that the first time is, of course, you need to educate the people. So we have one way with the French Space Agency, and so thanks to our US colleague and engineering that we can have in France. But the second time is how can we deal with the systems which are not so easily useful to present a kind of situation.
Thank you. Well, we have only a few minutes left, so I apologize. There are a number of questions that we weren't able to pose, but as I believe all the panelists will be here for the duration of the conference, so you can address them individually. But before closing, I think I'd like to challenge the panelists one more time, and I'd ask each of you, for each of your country, like what would be if you had to name like the 2 near-term goals for SSA vis-a-vis your country, and what like the 2 main steps, the next steps for SSA, and then what would be your hope for some kind of efforts on the United States to facilitate a collaboration with them. So what would you like the US to do to help you collaborate with them? I know this is a tough one, and I'm sure you're going to like scold me for this one later, but maybe we can try to. Who would like to start? I don't want to. I don't want to.
I can talk only for myself. First, I want to have a sensor. Second, I want to have a bigger sensor. And third, I want to have the United States to integrate those in their network. But that's just me talking.
Yes, as I told before, sensors is our concern. So the first step should be, we hope that the test that is ongoing can give us good results, so that we have a bistatic radar, and then the other thing could be to strengthen the agreement with the U.S. for sharing this I hope valuable data.
Okay, it's my turn. I have no lawyer. Two steps is, well, could be one step, large step.
Near-term step.
Okay.
Near-term step.
I would say that I would like to enhance better SSA in France, just to be sure and to better answer a previous question, to assume to have a good SSA in order to be a credible and useful partner with our allies, because it's no worth having a SSA, too little SSA, which if you are not useful for your partners. So my first step would be to get an SSA organization and in a center in France to be credible and useful for our partners in Germany and US as well. What US could do if this is my point of view. It's years now as I've seen some trying to deal with US people. And my best concern was I'm always dealing with different peoples. First time with US Air Force, then it was US Stratcom, then it was DOD, then it was OSD, then it was NSA, and I turn around all over the US. But sometimes I'm wondering who is responsible of dealing to what. Like in France, of course, we're a little nation, so it's easy for you. We have only 30 people in the Joint Space Command, so you have everywhere. Find me, I have all the numbers of phone, no problem. But within the United States, it seems for me very hard to know who is in charge of. And sometimes I'm standing, no, it's the commander of the Air Force, we don't want. Okay. No, it's the commander of the US Stratcom. Oh, okay. Well, so I'm better than sometimes we have a right direction because sometimes it's very difficult for us to handle with that. Thank you.
So in Japan, it's very simple. For the first step, we should establish the concept of the SSA in Japan. We don't have any concrete ideas, definition or project. We don't have any Japanese such thing. So I'm not the right person to, because I'm not the representative for Japan, but this is a very personal opinion. I asked our government to establish the concept of the SSA. And also I also proposed our government to create a new SSA, integrated SSA center in Japan, because at this moment, as I said before, the JAXA doing something like that, only JAXA. So we have to integrate such kind of the activity in Japan. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your last responses. And with this, I'd like to conclude the panel. So as you can see that everybody would like to improve the international collaboration, but as always, the devil lies in the details. So hopefully we can advance the details through this forum, as well as the discussions during the conference. And with this, I'd like to thank you, the panelists, very much, and as well as the patient audience.
Jana, I want to thank you that you conducted yourself fantastic, and it was just a great panel and just a lot of discussion. I think that it kind of opened the door to a lot of us from the from the commercial sector as well as the government sector that there is a lot of cooperation and collaboration between the many nations represented here, and that but there's still a little bit more work to do. And I think the takeaway is maybe in sensors. Maybe we can help you guys a little more in sensors. And I'll say on a personal note that although coming from Washington, not really known as a city of cooperation from a domestic perspective, I would say that all of your countries and your various space agencies, whether it's ASI or CNES, DLR, and certainly JAXA, and your different Ministry of Defense and your attachés are just fantastic representatives of your countries and really reach out to work with not just the U.S. government, but the commercial side. And it's been a pleasure for us personally to work with your different countries, and it's been very helpful, what you guys all do. That said, I have one bit of housekeeping. I guess there is one comment or clarification that needs to be made before we break for lunch. And I think, is there a Major Michael Duncan? Is he in the audience? Michael had one comment to make real quick, as long as it's not directed at me, my introductions. Michael's the chief at the SSA operations at the JSPOC.
Good afternoon, everybody. I know everybody's ready for lunch, so I won't be long. The current chief of SSA operations at the JSPOC, the U.S. chief, there's also a Canadian chief, which he gets the bigger office, which is funny. But that just shows the level of dedication that the current JSPOC has towards international space situational awareness and collaboration. And also with this international panel up there, it was interesting during the recent Phobos Grunt re-entry situation that we were all watching. We were actually able to take and utilize real sensor data from international sources and be able to integrate them into some offline processes that we were doing in our high accuracy catalog, and being able to just use and see the level of quality of that data. But I also wanted to clarify something that was said earlier this morning, and it had to do with statements made in the first panel, and it was about the accuracy of the JSPOC data based off of an SDA quote-unquote study that was done. And what I found out, because you can only imagine when that study hit the news and space.com picked up an article on that, how quickly our leadership was there to say, look into this and figure out what was wrong. So we went and did case-by-case look at every single discrepancy that was noted in that study. And I just want to let everybody know that it was more of a procedural differentiation and not an inaccuracy in data differentiation. So for instance, when you talk about a false positive being, hey, there's a conjunction coming up, but it turns out not to be a conjunction. Well, the majority of those, or nearly all of them, were because the data was put in advance, for instance, like 3 days in advance. And many of these objects, they're going to orbit the Earth 36 times in that period that we're giving the notification. So you might call it a false positive because of that, or a false negative might also be, in every instance but two, the false negatives were instances where we don't notify the same owner-operator of two of their objects that get close to each other. So that was a difference between a procedure that the SDA uses and that we use. We don't notify the same owner-operator of two of their satellites getting close to each other. So I just wanted to clarify that the catalog at the JSPOC is validated for accuracy 3 times a week, and the CSMs are checked and double-checked multiple times before they get sent out. So before we go into this whole week of SSA collaboration and SSA, I just wanted to verify everybody understands the JSPOC data is 99% accurate, and that there's a good quality there, and a quality checks and quality assessments to what we do. And I just leave that with you.
Thank you, Michael, for the clarification. I appreciate it. And needless to say, there'll be more discussion on that topic and many others in the last panel of the day, the commercial and civil space situational awareness panel. That being said, it's now time for lunch, and I don't want to be the person standing in the way of lunch.
Well, so far it's the half of the session is concluded, but I find it very beneficial for the debate, especially when we talk about collaboration and cooperation. Everybody feels like that there are a number of gaps in the existing space situational awareness capability. So I feel that although, you know, everybody talks about collaboration, that's one thing, and another thing is that all the actors that are involved get together and actually discuss the challenges. So from that perspective, I see this as a very good addition to the AMOS conference. Well, as was mentioned by a number of the panelists, if we talk just about the space situational awareness capabilities, I think on one hand, all the nations realize that they need to improve what they have, but at the same time, currently they all rely on the US-based data and information. So I think that it is important to see how to improve in the future the kind of US approach to these countries, but as well as for those countries to clarify what kind of collaboration that they like and they expect. So I think, again, I can speak only for the international panel, I guess, in that respect, but as you could see, all the countries are keen on, you know, improving the current status of the US collaboration. Nobody wants to just go off on their own. On the contrary, I think that they see it as an important venue for greater interaction.